Okay.
So, hello.
Hello.
Please introduce yourself and when did you come to Verbier and why?
Okay. Well, my name is Michael Constant. I'm the founder of Association Notre Our Verbier and its associated website and social media accounts. And the purpose of Our Verbier was to set up a digital website which recorded the story of Verbier. We have documents going back to 1900, videos, photographs, and so on, dozens of stuff. And a lot of it is also loaded up onto our Facebook and sometimes to our Instagram accounts. And and I think that's kind of what we're all about. Why I came to Verbier is because I came to learn to ski back in 1983. And it's kind of a slightly complicated story, but I would been living in Bahrain, working in Bahrain and in Asia. And while in Bahrain, I met some Aussies and Kiwis who were working for DHL, the courier service, and we became very good mates. Single guys, uh, not paying any tax, earning decent money, and having a just looking to have a good time. So they, I'd got back to England. They'd come back before me, and I rang them up and I said, "Hey guys, what are you doing?" And they said, "Well, we're off going to Verbier to work for another season. We did a season last year in a shop called Mountain Air. Sorry, oops. And yeah, it's a great place. You should come on up." And so I came out in the early December of '83 to do something called the Cour de Gadi, which in those days was run by the Swiss Ecole the Ski Suisse, um, which was basically a sort of 1 week course. Cours de Gadi means course of turning. And so for people like me, and you get divided up into groups, and depending on your levels, complete beginner like me, and so on. And it was great fun. In fact, I think I did 2 weeks of it. And during that time, I met my future partner, Maggie, who was working here as a chalet girl for her sister, who had started up a chalet company called Ski Genie back in 1976. And that's the beginning. Now, I should probably give a bit more about my background. I'm kind of an odd type because I'm sort of colonial, really. I kind of describe myself as more East African than British, but I am British. I was born in Iraq in 1950, and we moved around. My father was working as a sort of old colonial banker in the Middle East and Africa, and we moved around between Iraq and then Jordan, back to Iraq again, and then to Egypt about 54, 55, and went through the Suez crisis, and I got evacuated out while the Egyptian airfields were being bombed by the British, French, and the Israelis. We then moved to Kenya, near Nairobi, and we did 5 years in Kenya. We had the Mau Mau crisis while we were there, and then my father got posted to Khartoum in the Sudan. And while we're in Sudan, I think we had a couple of coups and a revolution, all good stuff, but nobody ever got killed, which was pretty good compared to nowadays. In '66, we moved to Jordan and to Oman, but unfortunately in '67, um, the um, the Arabs fought Israel in the Six-Day War. We got bombed again in Jordan, and Jordan lost the West Bank. We were in Jordan till '71, and then I think actually maybe '71, yeah. And then my father moved to Geneva. During this time, I was at sort of school. I went back to school in the UK because there wasn't much in the way of schools where we were. And then I went to university and so on. And that's basically it. I ended up in banking, rather like my father, I guess, but in a slightly different field, moving around between New York, Bahrain, and Hong Kong and Paris. And as I said, I came to Verbier in '83, and I've never really left. And um, we were coming back here probably a couple of times a year during the '80s. We made a lot of friends here, with various who've made their lives here. And after we got back from Hong Kong in '95, we came back to Verbier, and around 2000 we bought a place. And nowadays we're sort of been residents here for a few years ever since Brexit, and The and it's a very special place. Now, why? What is special about Verbier? There is something I think that is quite special and magical about this place. And the reason I think partly for it is because there's a sort of particular spirit about Verbier. But I think that spirit is driven because Verbier, unlike most other ski resorts, doesn't sit in a valley. It sits with its face to the sun. It's like a bowl facing the sun. And the sun travels around and it's always generally in the sun. If the sun's out, Verbier is in the sun. Whereas if you go to places like Zermatt and Chamonix, St. Anton, Val d'Isère, you're down in the valley. The sun goes. That, I think, reflects on the sort of type of people discovered Verbier. I think obviously everybody knows about the sort of free ride and how that started. And that obviously attracted a lot of people. Marco Shapiro's photographs on Powder magazine and Ulf Blomberg's as well attracted a lot of people to this hot ski resort called Verbier. But Verbier is not just about skiing. There's something about the place, and that is what I believe.
Can you put a name of that something about the place?
I think it's magic, really. I don't know quite what it is. You know, it's something special. I don't know. You sort of can't. Sorry, you can't. You can't really name it, but it's a spirit. I think it's called the Verbier spirit. I don't know what it is about it. It just people, you know, it's kind of like Hotel California. You know, you check out, but you can never leave, right? And that's happened. You know, I've gone back and forth between wherever we've been, but I always want to come back here. It's just that, you know, I don't know. It's the spirit. It's the magic of the place. That's it. Sorry.
Mhm. And then the question is, you moved in the 80s, and that was almost 40 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And the place must have changed dramatically since then, retaining the spirit.
Yeah.
So, what's changed?
Well, I think obviously it's the sort of physical things because so much, you know, the buildings have come and gone. The and my sons complain that, oh, Dad, it's you know, there's been change. You know, it's no longer Relais de Nez, for example. It's now Lumi and so on. And I go, it's always changed. Plus ça change, c'est la même chose, right? It's got still got that spirit. There are perhaps things like, you know, the growth of, you know, in terms of shops, we've lost a lot of the independent sort of family-owned shops because the owners have retired, and their, you know, sons and daughters don't want to take over. They don't want to stand in a shop all day and run shops, and so that, you know, we're starting to see brands come in like, you know, Montclair or, you know, what else, uh, Bogner and so on. And that is, I suppose, you know, everywhere's changing. That's what's happening in this world. You know, brand, little family-owned shops are being kind of not squeezed out, I'd say, but more people are retiring, and new things are coming in. I mean, one thing that is really different here compared to the 80s is how much better the lift system is. People have no idea what it was like. You could spend an hour and a half getting up from Medran to Runette, right? And you get up to Lac de Vaux, then you queue to get up to Atla, you ski Lac de Vaux, whatever it was, and you know, queue at the bottom. You'd go down Tortan, you could queue for an hour to get back up from Tortan. You just get locked into these bubbles. So what you do nowadays in a couple of hours would take us all day back in the day. So that, I think, has been a major change here, is simply the ability that they can move so many skiers up, distribute them around the mountain, and people don't really queue anymore. And that obviously contributes to the spirit of the place. But I think also, yeah, in terms of the après ski, Verbi's always been very strong for après ski. But what's really happened in the last few years is that the music has become much better, much stronger. You know, there's regular, every night there is somebody playing somewhere in Verbier, which attracts people. So that, I think, is a real, you know, major plus.
Well, let's go to the anecdotes because you are the source of them, I think. Well, you've experienced them
Yeah,
during the years here, obviously, and you also collect them
yeah.
for the website, so you might be the source for.
I don't. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a particular one straight off. Actually, it's quite sort. I mean, there are a lot of activities going on here. You know, for example, I'm involved in the pantomime. Um, and we're putting on a pantomime this Christmas called Sleeping Beauty. This is about our ninth pantomime in the last 12, 13 years. Obviously, we had a bit of a hiatus during COVID. I'm also involved with a new book about Verbier, which is going to be called Chronicles of Verbier, Chronique de Verbier, which I'm involved with a number of people, including Andre Gunnar, Marco Shapiro, Kerry Jane Lowry, Jean-Philippe Yuzzi, Marie-Madeleine Jabiou. I hope I pronounced your names right, guys. And that should come out next year. And it's actually the first real book about Verbier since about 1986. And it's going to talk about the story of Verbier from, I'm not quite sure when we're actually starting, but certainly up to the present day, and the challenges that Verbier faces. And some of those challenges, that's what's quite interesting to talk about, because you know, things like education have improved. We've had two new schools open up here. Okay, they're private schools, but our medical provision is much better because we now have free doctors' surgeries. There's still a bit of concern about sort of emergency, um, you know, um, service, but that's getting there. Parking is still remains as much of an issue as it always was, but it's because of the lift now runs from Le Chab up to Verbier. That is the total game changer. That has already happened the last 2 or 3 years. That the Le Chab lift runs from 5:15 to almost midnight. It makes a huge difference. But the big challenge is accommodation for the workers, and that has not been fixed. And people have known about that for years, but nothing has been done about it, and that is actually a bit of a tragedy. The other issue, of course, is the dear old Centre Sportif, since its fire, whenever it was, I can't remember how many years ago, it's still not been rebuilt. But we're getting there. They just recently announced the new lift going up from Les Essers to Savelaire is finally, they've broken ground and it should be ready by 2026, which is great news. Can't really say much about anecdotes, but of course, without mentioning, and Pub Montfort, which of course we've spent all of us, the crowd, have been spending many years there in the evenings, and Friday evenings we always gather there about 7 o'clock for, thank God it's Friday, and a general chinwag and so
What a life. You know what I'm thinking about? You said you're writing this book, collaborating with others about Verbier. And then you say it's a magical place that has its own spirit and
on.
magic. I agree with that. That's why I moved as well. But I'm also thinking you in return by being here, by sensing the magic, by writing about the place, you in return create this energy field around Verbier that
Mm.
attracts more, you know? So Verbier had something to begin with because of the position, the sun, the good mounting spirit and opportunities. But then you, by being here and generating interest to it, also participate in creating this magic. I don't think I don't think it's I don't know. I'm curious to know your opinion. I don't think that's the place that inspires you to write. I have a feeling listening to you that you, by being so inspired and passionate about it, you create part of the magic that attracts others here.
That's very flattering. But actually, can I just correct you? I'm not actually writing the book. That Mary Madeleine's writing it. I'm part of the people helping put it together as a committee to support it and so on, and contribute in whether it be anecdotes or whatever. What I do write actually is the pantomime script, and I think it's got a good community spirit here. One thing that is that people do come together on projects like the pantomime, for example. Though one thing that has happened here, which is quite interesting, is that a lot of people who came here, rather like me, met their partners, decided to stay, decided, for example, to build a business, rather like yourself, um, and then decided, obviously, they were going to have a family, but they've actually moved down into Le Chab, and that's got and Le Chab from 10 years ago is transformed in terms of the community. There's a very large community down there of sort of people in the age between 30 to 40 who've started a family, got a business running up here, built a chalet or a place to live, and that I think is that's been quite interesting to see that develop actually. What I'm worried about here is the potential that Verbier becomes, for want of a better word, a bit geriatric. You know, the population is aging because most of the young people are having to live down below, as I put it. And I think the commune needs to think about that fairly carefully in terms of trying to attract and make accommodation for young people to live up here.
But when you say commune needs to think about it or it needs to be fixed, how exactly do you fix? You have the laws restricting the development or the expansion of the place.
Yeah.
So how are you
I
going
think
to?
there are. I mean, I talked to Andre Gunnar. I think there are sufficient plots of land available where you could build accommodation, reasonable accommodation that's not too expensive. Of course, the attraction is to build yourself a 30 million franc chalet, rather than a block of flats for, 20, 30 people or whatever it might be. I don't know. But I think that is one of the biggest challenges Verbier faces right now. And I think everybody recognizes it. You can just see it on Verbier community and other Facebook groups about what, I'm looking for a place to live. I'll take anything. I'll sleep on a doormat or whatever.
But don't you think that this, in return, it is a challenge, of course,
Yeah.
but it also helps preserve the place. Otherwise, it will just turn into any other
Yeah,
touristy resort.
go to Crown Montana is all blocks of flats, for example, and so on. But they're very good here about making sure that stuff is built in the kind of chalet style, the Verbier style, and that is, you can look at these blocks, even the small blocks of flats around, apart from the monstrosity that is Migros. You look at, say, Valentine and Victoria; those are pretty nice looking buildings. So of course very expensive flats, but you can, with a decent architect, produce something.
Yeah, I agree. I meant mostly not the visual aesthetical part of it, but more just overcrowding.
Yeah.
How many people can the mountain like, accommodate
I
and
think
handle?
very rarely is a mountain really super crowded because we've got such a much bigger area and because people get distributed so much more quickly nowadays. It's not really a problem, I think. Um, at least that's not what I reckon is a challenge, so to speak. And you've got to remember also as well is that we're now becoming more of an all year round resort, and that is where the shift. Maybe that's partly climate change or whatever, but we are, in terms of the summer activities now are, there's just, I mean, it's like compared to what it was back in the 80s, there wasn't anything really much going on here. At least I don't remember it. Mind you, I didn't come here that much in the summer.
Let's continue about the climate change
Mm.
or whatever people label it. It's I'm sure for you it's clear that during the last 40, 30, 20 years here, and especially the last 10, 5 years, just I've been here, you see the glaciers just disappearing, shrinking, the
Yeah,
seasons have changed.
yeah,
And it seems like a natural, logical progression for the place to utilize all the seasons available and create
mm.
the structure and the activities and just facilities for that.
Yeah.
So what do you think? It looks quite linear one way only at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not so
It's
sure. It's sort of, if you look, we've got some statistics. We got, for example, the snowfall numbers on the Our Verbier website from about 69 to about, I can't remember, 79, 80. And it's quite interesting. In some years, there was very little snow. There was one, I can't remember which one was a famous year. Maybe that was in the 60s, the famous no, pas de neige year, virtually nothing. And I can remember, for example, in 84, 85, skiing La Chaux just down a ribbon of snow, which they'd Televerbi piled up and so on. The rest of it was all brown. Uh, Last year, for example, we had early snow, but then we had that rain in January, which kind of wrecked everything. Then we had lots of late snow. I mean, this year snow's been late coming, but wow, we had a decent, 60, 70 centimeters in the last couple of days up top, and down here we've had about 50. So it's yes, everybody knows there's climate change. It's affecting things in different ways. It is a challenge. How the world is going to do about it, because it's not just us trying to do something. It's got to be everybody.
What do you think, just shifting a little bit to the future, what do you think people need in terms of personality traits and adaptability traits or anything like that, personal character traits, to be able to stay and love it here, not just stay for the profit or for the because it's a fast developing place, but for that spirit, for that magic of Abria. What's
Find
needed?
a way to contribute to the community is, I think, is what it's about, actually. Whether it's getting involved in things like a pantomime or playing music or starting something up. People have got lots of ideas here. You've got the sort of what was the Mountain Hub is now a co-working cooperative. um, so people are getting together to start things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but the main important thing is to try and get something going, and that, I think, is what happens. And I think it has a real community spirit here, and you can see that in terms, and you feel it in the air, at least in my view.
Continuing the community topic, where is this line or border between being a local in a very international place formed mostly by people coming from the outside and being an outsider or being an immigrant or
I,
something?
you know, people people say, well, the locals, you've got to be born in the Val de Ban, and so on. But I think now, I think it's anybody personally. I think it's anybody who lives in the de Ban is a sort of permanent resident, rather than say a seasonal worker who's moving around from resort to resort, whether it be in the summer or the winter. But that's just my own view. Um, I'm sure that's probably slightly controversial, but I think, yes, becoming, you look at cities like London. London has never been, there's no such thing as locals in London. London has been, immigrants have been coming to London since, what, 1,000 odd years, for example. It's a very international place. But they're all locals, right? They live in London, they made their homes in London, and that's what's key, and that's what contributes to the spirit and the magic of the place. Mm. In terms of a language thing, I think if as long as you make some sort of effort to speak the language, generally speaking, my accent is so terrible that they immediately say, please speak in English, because it's, I can't bear it. I'm mangling it so much. I don't think my accent is that terrible, but Marco says, not not great, but at least I make the effort. I think main thing to do is to make the effort. One of the other changes that's really happened here, and that's particularly since Brexit, is that the old British seasonaires have been replaced by Latin seasonaires, and that's been another major change. You hear a lot more Spanish now, Spanish or Italian, so to speak, in Verbier than you ever did before. And that, I think, is actually also, they brought their culture to them. They have their Monday night Latino nights and so on, and that's great. It adds to the mixture. It reminds me more of the sort of London, which is a melting pot. Maybe, and there is resentment down below in the valley about, this is Verbier is a sort of sin city. There's always people partying all the time and having a great time, but it's becoming more of a melting pot up here. I think it's probably a bit more different down there, and I think everybody recognizes, this is the golden goose that feeds everybody down there. And what they often, although they complain about Verbier, they want the money. And if they say Verbier's changed, well, they sold their birthright. They sold their land up here, right? Because that way they could make enough money to retire. And of course, originally, this was poor land. So that was given to the younger son or or maybe a daughter or whatever, because the rich land down the valley by the river was given to the eldest son. And hey guys, that's the way that the cookie crumbles.
The irony of history, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting. So coming to back to your brilliant website and histories, what's the most extraordinary or mind blowing or very confusing thing you discovered, or a poster or anecdote
No,
or
actually,
something?
funnily enough, there's a very interesting study which I found at the Tourist Office archive, which was done in 1945, August 1945, by the Federal Bureau of Transportation, which did a detailed study of Verbier's potential as a tourist resort. And it's really it's quite difficult to read in some places because it wasn't very easy to scan. But it proposes, for example, a sanatorium up near Carrefour. It's got various other ideas, which you can see, well, we need to do this, we need to do that. It's quite prescient. Um, by that time in 1945, I think there'd been a bit of skiing, some skiing here in the 1930s, and people were starting to come up. And I think the Hotel Montfort, maybe one other hotel, had opened or to accommodate particularly summer walkers and so on. But it really started going, I mean, Verbier started going really, I think, by the early 60s. And, the legend is that the Belgians arrived with their money from escaping from Congo after Congo was given independence in 1961. And they didn't want to, they wanted to keep their money in Switzerland, not in Belgium, for obvious reasons. And somebody must have come up here, and then other Belgians followed, and then the Dutch followed, and then the English followed after exchange controls were imposed in '68, and that's how some of the things got going.
How random, right?
Yeah,
Like,
very random.
but nothing is random.
No, exactly. And here we are in one of the most beautiful places in the world. Look around you. There's, all the trees are loaded with snow. It's just so pretty. But people, though, funnily enough, I think it's also becoming, because of the summer, a lot of people like being up here in the summer because it's cooler. As climate change affects, and suddenly you're down in, Malaga of 40 degrees heat and so on, and then of course the terrible floods recently. I think a lot of people are saying, well, actually, being up here, it's you've always got a bit of a breeze up here. It's cooler, there's shade, and of course there's fun, there's a community. You walk down the street here, and I'll see 10 people that I know and say hello to. That's what's one of the things which is so great about being here.
What is your wish or a request maybe for the future generations of people coming here and settling here?
What would they? I think they need accommodation. That's what I really think is what we need. We need to figure out that, and possibly some of the transport up into Verbier, whether or not we're going to need a new road of some kind coming in towards Patier or something like that. That because that road down, the switchback road is, it's if that gets cut in any way, we're stuffed. We've only got the small bubble. We're going to need another bubble coming up here. I know there's a plan to go up from, I suppose, somewhere like Espace Saint Marc, maybe to La Chaux, maybe via Sarrier. That's a project. Whether or not that will ever happen, who knows? But things change, plus ça change, but it's
Mhm.
still got the same spirit. Thank you.
Thank you.